Alright guys, what's up, Um, I decided to go ahead and throw in a little smoke sesh today. I wanted to come up with a little bit of a video that also will help to describe some of the things that I've been wanting to put down, kind of chopping pieces in my lives, but then I've been noticing too, the fact that the lives delete after 30 days has really been doing me a disservice. I was thinking about it and it's like, fudge, my videos are gone. I was like, at first I didn't think, it was really that big a deal, but now that I go back, I'm like, a lot of my content is just gone. So, like, people are only able to just, like, find me if I keep making videos. Like, none of my old work is getting. So, anyhow, long story short, diatribe avoided. I'm going to start recording these. I'm going to just start making the sessions. That way, if I show off a product or if I do the specific thing in the video, it's sort of kind of locked in. So, anyhow, I do want to sort of talk about something today that's been driving me crazy. I think it's doing a disservice, and I think eventually the industry is going to move away from these descriptors. Um, Sorry about that. Un momento, por favor. But yeah, I think we're going to move away from the whole indica sativa and hybrid model. And the reason I think this is because, first off, indica sativa and hybrid don't really describe the way that plant is going to make you feel. Indica sativa and hybrid has nothing to do with the description of the cannabinoid slash terpene profile, which is going to be a lot more of a descriptor of how you're going to feel. Sativa, indica, and hybrid has long been used to categorize, what the plant is and kind of how it's going to make you feel. And the reason they did is because, A, sativas, the actual description of cannabis, the actual scientific name is Cannabis sativa L. And with sativas, you actually tend to find them much more in the tropical, closer to the equator areas of the earth. For instance, like, I know Mexico is quite famous for having cannabis. So is Jamaica. Obviously, Bob Marley put that on the map. But there was just so many things and so many areas where sativas are known and sort of ingrained into the culture, the history of these places. And again, they're all much more like tropical and closer to the equator zone, so they have a much more just perfect for growing year-round climate. And now, this is why sativas tend to be a lot more lanky, a lot taller, usually because they're fighting other vegetation. Also, they tend to flower in 4 months instead of just two, like their indica counterparts. And the big reason too is just because they can. They have a lot more sunlight, a lot more of the same year round as far as their climate than the indica counterparts. So, and now hybrids are another thing, and we'll talk about that in a second. But now indicas tend to be much more further from the equator and much more mountainous and less light, Now, funny thing to that is usually the indicas were closer to the sun because of the higher altitude, but we all know how higher altitudes play a different role in things. So anyhow, where the indicas were found again was in less light, usually higher altitudes and more mountainous areas of the world, Afghanistan, India, Russia. So anyhow, and so these areas of the world had less light, and so the indica tends to be shorter and bushier with a much heavier yield because there was a much higher need for seeds. So that way there was more progeny given more chance to actually spread those genetics in something living. Because like I said, whereas the sativas closer to the equator, they were able to spread just a few seeds, and those were almost guaranteed to make it if they would land. But that's why they needed to be so tall, because they needed to get over a lot of the other vegetation that was already growing. But anyhow, back to the indicas. So they flower out in 2 months, not 4 like the sativas. They usually flower in around 2 months. They're having to be quicker. They're shorter. They're flowering quicker. They're producing a lot more yield. They the indica counterparts, because they're flowering out so quickly. Now here's the thing: with an indica, because it flowers in 2 months, you tend to have it like this. In the early stages of cannabis, it's forming CBG, okay? And then the later stages, you're getting into the CBN. So the earlier you harvest your trichomes, the more CBG and CB, I would say C, and you're much more stimulating terpenes and cannabinoid profile. Well, not terpenes, but you're more stimulating cannabinoid profile. You'll have THCA, of course, but your CBG, CBC, CBD levels will be much different if you harvest that plant earlier versus if you harvest the plant later in flower. So, for instance, say you flip it to flower, you wait, and say the plant is supposed to flower out in like around 2 months. Okay, we'll say right at that 2 month period you harvest, because you're just like whatever. No matter where they are in the stage, you harvest because it just says 2 months. Well, say it really took 2 months and 2 weeks. Technically, you're going to have some buds there, but they would have been more finished, more CBN laden had you waited 2 months and 2 weeks. But instead of, you harvested at 2 months, so therefore those buds are going to be much heavier in your CBG, your CBCs, than they would be in CBN and CBD. So what I'm getting at is the earlier you harvest, the more sativa it feels, and the later you harvest, the more indica it feels. But because sativas take so long to flower, they take 4 months. Most people harvest them earlier than they should, because they're not going to wait 4 months and like a half or 5 months. They're going to be like, by 4 months, of flower, they're done with them. They're ready to harvest. So they end up harvesting sativas generally a little earlier than they should, giving them a more sativa feel. Whereas indicas, because they flower out so quickly, people usually can give them the 2 months and 2 weeks. So they most of the time give indicas their full run, sometimes even a little too long. So therefore they form a lot more CBN, giving them a more indica feel. But again, just because it's an indica or a sativa, if you run a sativa long, if you run a sativa for 6 months, that bitch will start to fucking feel like a damn indica. Or if you take an indica and harvest it early, it will have a more sativa feel. So you can't always go off of the fact that it's a sativa or it's an indica. And therefore, that's why I think that the model will move away from that, because it's easily to dupe it. It's easy to get a bag thinking it's going to be a sativa and it not feel sativa. So therefore, I just think that in the future, the terpene profile and the cannabinoid profile is what we're going to display in the plant much more than if it's a sativa hybrid or an indica. I think they may list that, but at the same time, there's no quantifiable test to tell me really how much sativa versus how much indica. When they tell you on the package that it's 20% sativa or 30%, it's just a guess. They're just guessing off of what they were told. Um, Therefore, I truly think that in the future we're going to move away from that, and what we'll do is they'll tell you, okay, this plant contains, linalool, myrcene, and like your top three most prevalent terpenes, and then I think the next thing that they'll go to will be your cannabinoid profiles. So you'll get to see your top three prevalent terpenes, or maybe even your top 10. They may even do a top 10. So you may see a little column that'll say, like, it'll be like sour diesel, and then it'll say top 10 terpenes that are listed, and then it'll be the next one down will say the cannabinoid profile. So it'll tell you the percentage of THCA, it'll tell you CBD, CBG, CBC, and so then you will be able to go, I know that CBG, the sativa, that bothers me, makes my heart flutter. I don't like that. So therefore, I can avoid any plant that has high levels of CBG and CBC because those ones make me freak out. It doesn't matter if it's an indica or sativa. I just know that those levels, if it's high, will make me panic. So therefore, I can avoid what doesn't make me feel good, or what makes me feel good I can go after a lot better than just hybrid indica or sativa, because those names can be misleading to begin with. The hybrid too, by the way, the whole hybrid thing, let me just tell you. So hybrid is supposed to be sativa crossed with indica, right? Well, the big thing is everything now is a hybrid. The fact that if you think at this point that it hasn't been crossed and crossed and crossed again, get some of the true companies, the ones that really show you their breeding process and that show you exactly how they go about like manipulating the plant. By the time you guys are smoking it, it has been bred and crossbred, and it is there everything's a hybrid now. Like to get a true sativa or a true indica is so hard now, because here's another thing. The sativas, when we brought them up, okay, so back in the day, like with Mexico, one of the reasons we sent our little hippie pilgrimages over to the Indica Mountains was because we needed to bring back genetics that we could cross with the Mexican plants and make them actually harvestable. Because here's what was happening: the Mexican plants that we were bringing the seeds from up north from Mexico and planting them in our own gardens here in America. The thing was, is they took 4 months to flower. So okay, it starts flowering in September. So September, October, November, December. Okay, 4 months from September when they start flowering means that we are literally covered in snow and frosted over and dead before they're ready to harvest. We can't do that. So what we needed was something that could be flowering around late August and could finish up by before the first frost. So we crossed indicas with the ones we got there with these badass sativas from Mexico, and now the plants were able to be August, late August, so September and October, and then harvested in the very first of November for the first frost. So that is how we were even able to have all this weed in California and stuff, is because we made hybrids. So everything's a hybrid. I mean, if you just anyway, the only way to get a true sativa would be to go like they're doing with like the strain hunters and go over to like Afghanistan, and or I'm sorry, true indica would be to go over to Afghanistan and get one of those dudes who's been growing his grandfather's crop and has been making hashish for 200 years. Like, but those things are far and few between. They're running out of those. We've hunted those. So it's anyhow. I'm diatribing here. So anyway, big thing is move away from the indica sativa hybrid model. Go towards the profiles. Go towards how many terpenes of this kind, and go towards how much CBD, CBG, CBA. Go towards the THC and the cannabinoid profile. See what's in the plant. Because of shit what name and what sativa, indica, or hybrid it is. They're all hybrid. So anyhow, that's enough of me diatribing today. Let's do a dab and we'll end this video. Oh, I've already got it already. Teen fair. Okay, well let's do this. We're gonna just do a cold start. But we're going to need a marble. And this one requires this marble. Alright. And that's it. Now we're ready. Cheers. Appreciate you guys. Thank you for coming.